For those of you who haven't yet seen part 1, I would strongly recommend that you go do that. For those of you who have, as I said in the ending, it's time to talk about Sgt. Pepper. One day, while eating a meal, Paul McCartney heard someone say salt and pepper. He misheard it, however, as Sgt. Pepper. From that one sentence, the Beatles created a concept for an entire record. The decision was made for each band member to play a different character while writing the album. As Paul is quoted saying in the CD booklet, our attitude now is that of a completely different set of individuals, and not the attitude that we normally have had as the Beatles. The making of this record became a wild, colorful fairground ride where all things were possible. The rest of the band, however, apparently wasn't as enthused. Sitting around while Paul and producer George Martin toyed around with overdubs was apparently quite boring. If I'm being honest, this album intimidated me. The reputation it has is unlike any other release in rock music. It frequently topped Rolling Stone's recurring 500 best albums of all time list, and is still the best-selling album by a British artist. When it came time to listen to it, I was anxious as to how it actually sounded. Even so much as looking at the CD and leafing through the booklet made me feel in awe. How did it sound? Pretty great. I can definitely see why this album has received the praise it's got. However, after thinking it over for a bit, I can safely say that I don't think it's the best album they've put out so far. I would have to say Revolver is. That's in no way a slight against Sgt. Pepper, I just feel that Revolver is more of an all-killer, no-filler album. Whereas Sgt. Pepper, as great as it is, definitely has some parts that feel a little superfluous, such as the reprise of the title track. Plus, Revolver just resonated with me more, as subjective as that is. I'll start talking about the parts I liked now. The opening title track is obviously one of the highlights. It has a very marching band feel to it, which is accomplished by the use of horns and percussion. I also really dig Paul's singing. It sounds strange, but in a good way. With a little help from my friends is the only song on the album sung by Ringo, and as is always the case, he brings his A-game. The melody he sings is infectious, and Paul's bass provides a nice bass. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds is one of John's all-time best songs. What can I say? Just scratches the perfect itch for me. His singing is flawless in my opinion, and that's a big part of it. George also provides some playing on an Indian instrument called the tambura, which adds to the psychedelic feel. Even if the song isn't really about LSD, it's still one of the best drug songs ever. Fixing a Hole is actually a song inspired by LSD. Paul was inspired to write the lyrics after seeing a little blue hole while tripping. The lyrics themselves are about, as Paul put it, the hole in your makeup which lets the rain in and stops your mind from going where it will. Whatever you say, pal. Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite is a song that has a really strange midsection. It suddenly gets a very carnivalesque vibe, which I wasn't sure how I felt about at first. Multiple different forms of organs are used. They use an interesting recording method, cutting up the tape into bits and splicing them together randomly. She's Leaving Home starts out with what sounds like a harp, and it sets a tone for a very string-heavy song. We got a lot of Eleanor Rigby vibes off this track. This track is unique in that it's one of only a few Beatles songs where none of the 4 members play an instrument. All of the instruments on this track were done by session musicians, whereas the Beatles themselves just handled vocals. Within You, Without You is George's only song on the album. As is to be expected with the songs at this point, it features a great influence from Indian music. It features sitar and Hindu-esque percussion heavily. It's really nice. When I'm 64 is a lot like Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite in that it sounds slightly comedic at points. Specifically, there are horns played during the verse that emit sort of a jolly vibe. On the subject of interesting instruments, Lovely Rita is a song that has what sounds like kazoos, but are actually cones with tissue paper. The song itself has lyrics about falling in love with a meter maid, which is definitely a first. Paul used the term in the lyrics because it isn't widely used in the UK, so he didn't hear it for a while. When he did, he just liked the way it sounded. The sessions for this album produced the singles Strawberry Fields Forever and Penny Lane. Correction, single. They released them as a double A-side, and the numbers were split between the two, making this the first single since Please Please Me to not hit number 1. The former is one that would have made the album a lot better than it already is if it was included. It's a very peaceful song with a lovely melody and good guitar work. The pace of the song does change at points, but I kinda like that. This was due to them combining two versions of the song and having to change the speed of the latter so that the key change wouldn't be noticeable. The latter isn't as good in my personal opinion, but I still really like it. It has a very optimistic feel to it with its upbeat piano line and catchy vocal melody. We are officially into Beatles' weird phase. The seeds were starting to be sown in Revolver, but this is the album where they really went all out there in terms of concepts and instrumentation. This is a phase they would only continue on their follow-up, Magical Mystery Tour. This album is odd. Half of the tracks are the soundtrack to the TV movie of the same name. What was the movie about? Well, as my dad put it, it didn't have a plot. The idea was that the band and his entourage would ride around England on a bus, on drugs, and marvelous things would just happen. It doesn't sound very coherent, and neither does this album. The funny thing is that this wasn't even initially released as an album in the UK, instead being released as an EP. The full album features the 6 songs used on the film's soundtrack, as well as 5 singles already released. Those 5 singles include Strawberry Fields Forever and Penny Lane, which I wish I had looked up in advance, otherwise I wouldn't have listened to those when I was listening to Sgt. Pepper. The album's opening title track sounds very strange. The vocal harmonies are rather dissonant, and there are more horns than I was expecting. The mix is also somewhat odd. I should mention now that the earbuds I had at the time for my CD player are kinda sucky, and the left one didn't work too well. Normally this isn't much of a problem, but for this song specifically I found I could barely hear the drums. Luckily the rest of the album wasn't like this. Fool on the Hill is a song I found very tranquil to listen to. It has a lot of flutes and whistles, and they had a nice effect. Flying is an instrumental. When I was taking notes for it, I actually wrote, "Oh wait, I guess it's over now." Not really much else to say. Blue Jay Way is kicked off with some really nice organ playing, which always makes a song better. The vocals are treated with a very wordly effect, which creates a psychedelic feel. I very much dig it. Your Mother Should Know is another song that uses organ really well, and it also features really upbeat piano line. Guess they couldn't decide which form of keyboard to use, so they just used both. Baby You're a Rich Man is a song I have good memories of. It plays during the final scene of The Social Network, a movie I've seen about 20 times. It has a really catchy piano line, great bass playing, and cool high-pitched vocals from John. There are also weird guitar noise effects that sound nice. The album closes with All You Need Is Love, another song that I heard one too many times when I was young and can't ever hear the same way again. I will say though that I forgot that the song opens by borrowing a motif from the French national anthem, La Marseillaise. This album is definitely a net positive experience to listen to. That being said, it feels more like a loose collection of songs rather than a cohesive album. Hell, that's literally what the second half is. Part of why I didn't enjoy it as much is my own fault. As I mentioned before, I had already listened to Strawberry Fields Forever and Penny Lane, so when they came on, I skipped them. Due to this, the album felt shorter than the others. The next album I'll be talking about certainly won't. Possibly the band's most ambitious project, I'm talking about the White Album. Monsters, Inc., The Lion King, Toy Story, Airplane. These are all movies you could watch in less time than it would take to listen to this album. I mentioned being intimidated by Sgt. Pepper before I listened to it. The White Album, however, is the only album that I was truly scared to cover, mainly because of how impenetrable it seemed. This was the only album where I had to spread the listening over 2 days. For such a massive piece of work, it makes sense that its impact is equally as large. Not only did it inspire countless musicians, but it also kickstarted a trend of self-titled albums commonly referred to by a color. Weezer ought to write the Fab Four a check. Many of the songs for this album were written whilst on a spiritual retreat to India. The only Western instrument they brought with them was an acoustic guitar, hence the instrument's prevalence on the album. The process of making this album was a chaotic one. It was the first recording session where John began bringing Yoko along. While I don't agree with the whole Yoko broke up the Beatles thing, she did definitely cause a bit of conflict, intentional or not. The peak of the conflict occurred when Ringo quit the band for 2 weeks. Of the album's 30 songs, only 16 feature all 4 members, as many backing tracks were completed either by the main songwriter or by session musicians. The album starts off on a high note with Back into USSR. It reminds me a lot of their early material in terms of infectious energy. It has pounding piano and a sweet guitar solo. Paul plays drums on it, which is interesting of him to do. Glass Onion is a song I was looking forward to purely because it shares its name with the movie. The lyrics are pretty funny as they reference both Strawberry Fields and I Am the Walrus. Instrumentally, it has background strings that contribute nicely. The vibe is overall very upbeat. Obla-Dee Obla-Da is famously one of the band's most hated tracks. Personally, I don't feel too strongly about it. It's not their best work, but there's nothing really hate-worthy about it. I actually kind of dig the rhythm of it. Wild Honey Pie is a bizarre track. It has dissonant backing vocals, a strange melody, and it ends after only 52 seconds. I kind of feel like this song was included as a joke. The continuing story of Bungalow Bill is notably written and partially sung by Yoko. Her singing doesn't add much, but she's alright, I guess. The song itself is rather catchy, with a nice bass line and cool mellotron track. While My Guitar Gently Weeps has a rather simple guitar riff that's actually pretty heavy at points. Wikipedia refers to this as a hard rock song, which is an interesting path for the Beatles to take. This is a song written by George, and its lack of Indian instruments makes it an anomaly amongst his songs. His double-tracked vocals add a very nice effect. Happiness is a Warm Gun sounds a little ominous at times with its intricate, clean guitar lick. The song eventually does up the tempo a bit, and the guitars get distorted. These definitely make the song, in my opinion. Martha, My Dear has an upbeat feel to it. This is accomplished by its use of a catchy piano line and backing horns. Later on, we get a nice bass line from Paul. Blackbird is amazing. I know it's just Paul and an acoustic guitar, but that's all it needs. The finger-picked guitar line is beautiful, and Paul's vocals on this song are flawless. One of Paul's best songs by far. No, I'm not just giving this song praise because it's one of the few finger-picking lines I know how to play. Despite its lighthearted title, Piggies is an explicitly political song. The piggies in question are the wealthy kind, the upper class. Written by George, this song has a very Baroque influence, with its harpsichord and horn section. Don't Pass Me By is Ringo's one lead vocal performance on the album, as well as his first sole songwriting credit. As is the case with songs he sings, it has a heavy country influence, mainly due to the lovely fiddle playing that features heavily. Why Don't We Do It in the Road is a song desiring simple love. It was inspired by Paul noticing two monkeys screwing in the middle of a road. How romantic. Closing out the first half is I Will. This song famously has a bass line played not on bass guitar, but sung by Paul. The rest of the song is indeed rather catchy, and a good way to end the first half. That's right, we still have a whole other 45 minutes worth of music to discuss. The second half of the album starts off with Birthday, stylistic throwback to their early days. It's a catchy, energetic track with a super sweet bass line. There's also a dissonant sounding piano in the background that surprisingly doesn't sound out of place. As the title suggests, Yer Blues has a heavy blues influence. This is mainly due to the way the vocals and guitar are done. The guitar work has a lot of bends which do indeed sound quite nice. Mother Nature's Son is a really peaceful folk-influenced song in which Paul plays all the instruments. I really like the pretty guitar line. Sexy Sadie has a really catchy piano line that, fun fact, inspired the melody to Karma Police by Radiohead. Even disregarding that, this song is super cool to listen to. Helter Skelter is an absolute banger. The intro guitar lick catches your ear right away, and the rest of the song doesn't let up. It's one of the few Beatles songs that makes me want to headbang. Unlike certain people, however, it didn't inspire me to want to start a race war. Long, Long, Long is a song written by George. It starts out very quiet, and even when it picks up a bit, keeps a pretty chill vibe. The ending of the song was apparently inspired by a bottle vibrating on a speaker. Revolution 1 is a pretty low-key, folk-inspired song. I like the shooby-doo-wop backing vocals. Talk more about it later. Savoy Truffle has interesting lyrics. Inspired by Eric Clapton's heroin-induced Sweet Tooth, the lyrics list different flavors of chocolate. As far as the instruments go, it has a melodic bass line and cool horns. Definitely the strangest song, not just on the second half, but the album as a whole, is Revolution 9. This is a pretty notorious song in the Beatles' discography. Not only do they not sing, but they don't play any instruments. The song consists entirely of various audio recordings, making it more akin to an experiment in sound editing than an actual song. This is one song very heavily inspired by Yoko's presence. Personally, I actually really dig this song. I love a lot of avant-garde music, and this song is no exception. I find something about it just hypnotic. The album closer, Good Night, is written by Ringo. He's also the only Beatle on the track, as the backing orchestral score is played by session musicians. This song is a lullaby written for John's son, Julian. I think it's a peaceful note to close the album on. The recording sessions also produce the singles Hey Jude and Revolution. I really enjoy Hey Jude, even if it goes on for too long and gets overplayed to death. Paul does a really good job singing this one. Revolution most likely got left off the album due to there already being 2 versions of the song on the track listing. This one is intended as a different version of Revolution 1. It's significantly more up-tempo, making it more akin to hard rock. I think the lyrics are interesting. I had assumed the song was calling for revolution, but instead it's questioning whether one should happen, and suggesting that the real revolution we need is inside our own heads. While I think some songs on the White Album could have been cut, that's to be expected for a release of its length. After such a venture, it would make sense if the band were exhausted songwriting-wise. This proved to be the case, as their next album was only half actual songs. I'm talking about Yellow Submarine. Yellow Submarine is a soundtrack album to the animated movie of the same name. The movie features the Beatles traveling to the magical Pepperland to save it from the music-hating Blue Meanies. It was well received by critics and would go on to prove a significant influence on many filmmakers. Pixar co-founder John Lasseter would commend the film for demonstrating on a large scale that animation could be more than just a medium for children's entertainment. But how did the album turn out? Well, like I already said, only half of the album has Beatles songs, with the second half consisting entirely of orchestral tracks. Of the 6 actual songs written by the Beatles, 2 are ones I've already mentioned: Yellow Submarine and All You Need Is Love. Because of that, I don't really have much to say about the album as a whole, but I'll give it my best. Only a Northern Song is written by George. With its heavy use of organs and miscellaneous sound effects, it has a very psychedelic feel to it. It also has a lot of horns. All Together Now, as the title implies, is a song that's perfect for group sing-alongs. With its strummed acoustic guitar and upbeat rhythm, it's a nice song. Hey Bulldog is a song with a really sweet groove. I really like how the piano, bass, and guitar sync up in the intro. The bass line in particular is really good on this song. Very melodic. The random laughter at the end is a bit odd, but it fits the tone of the album. It's All Too Much has a really nice rhythm that's only aided by the hand-clapping track that's added in. There's some really catchy keyboard playing, and the horns are utilized nicely. There you have it. That's every Beatles song on the album that I haven't yet covered. I could do the orchestral songs, but I honestly have no idea how to talk about that kind of music. Plus, they don't even play on them, so they don't really count. Now that this little blip is over, it's time to talk about Let It Be. I know that going by release order, Let It Be is the last Beatles album, and Abbey Road is a penultimate album. However, given that the majority of the recording process was completed before Abbey Road, it made sense to me to put Let It Be where it is in the order. Plus, it feels right to save Abbey Road for last. It's impressive that Let It Be turned out as good as it is, given all the chaos that happened behind the scenes. The interband tensions that had begun to arise during the sessions for the White Album only escalated. Things were only exacerbated by the constant presence of the film crews for the documentary they were trying to make. This time, it was George's turn to briefly quit the band, although he did thankfully return. The mixes were initially packaged under the album name Get Back, but the band rejected this version. Eventually, half of the band recorded and released an entirely new album. Let It Be was finished and released. The opening track, Two of Us, is a very chill song overall. The acoustic guitar strumming and drum beat give it a very country feel. George is the one who plays the bass line on this song, and he does it on a 6-string bass, which is quite cool. I, Me, Mine is a George song, and it starts out with his vocals sounding very high and almost whimsical, while being backed by peaceful orchestral music. The song then changes pace into an upbeat rock song, reminiscent of their early days. Very nice. Dig It is a 50-second joke song. That's all there is to it. Title track is just beautiful. I know it's a bit cheesy, but the combination of the piano playing and Paul singing just hits me just in the right spot. The other instruments add a nice touch too. The song was also played at my grandfather's funeral, so it's a little personal to me. Maggie May is only 40 seconds, but I love all of them. It's a cover of a traditional Liverpool folk song, and the Beatles cover it with lots of energy. What can I say? It's catchy. One After 909 is a song that has a heavy early rock and roll influence. The bass and drums provide a great backbone, and the acoustic guitar is really nice. There's also really cool organ playing. It was originally written back when John was only 17, and they held on to it until this point. The Long and Winding Road is a peaceful song with piano and vocals. There are also added orchestral elements that engineer Phil Spector added without the band's permission, and were hated by all four of them. I like them, if I'm being honest. For You Blue is another George song. It has really nice acoustic guitar playing, as well as a lap steel guitar track. Not exactly sitar, but I'll take it. Get Back is really upbeat, and listening to it made me want to bob my head. The drum beat kind of reminds me of a train engine. There's also a really dope organ solo. All three of the singles released for this album were included in the track listing, so I'll only focus on the two B-sides I think are worth talking about. Don't Let Me Down is notably the only Beatles song to have a musician other than the main four be credited. In this case, keyboardist Billy Preston. His playing really adds a new element to the song. It manages to be both upbeat and peaceful at the same time, if that makes sense. The band actually found him such a breath of fresh air that they discussed having him officially join the group. The chorus has a real sing-along quality to it as well. You Know My Name, Look Up the Number is a strange song. It was originally intended as a novelty track, so that should be no surprise. It starts out with upbeat piano playing and vocals that sound almost yelled, and are delivered almost in a gang vocal sort of style. It then transitions into a style that reminds me of mambo music, with maracas and vocals that sound almost crooning. Then we get scattered vocals and a saxophone track played by special guest Brian Jones of the Rolling Stones. Given that it barely got released in the first place, Let It Be is a damn good album. Now it's time to talk about the Beatles' swan song. An album I probably don't even have to say the name of, but will anyway. Abbey Road. Well, here we are. After all this time, we've finally reached the end stage in the Beatles' discography. All the hundreds of songs I've listened to have led up to this. Possibly the most famous discography closer of all time, I was anxious to see if this album would live up to its reputation. That it certainly did. I don't have any intent of ranking Beatles songs, but if I did, the opening track, Come Together, would be top 5 at least. Everything about it is great. The bass line is one of the best earworms they've ever done. The drums are simple yet phenomenal. The verses are so clearly building up to something that when the chorus finally comes, it's such a great catharsis. Something is a George song, and it's one of his best in my opinion. It starts out on a really peaceful note, with his gentle vocals and guitar, Ringo's sparse drumming, and Paul's melodic bass working to perfection. Later on, it gets louder and his vocals more passionate, but it stays pretty. Maxwell's Silver Hammer is a song with a bit of a jolly tone to it, with its drum beat and the way it's sung. It's a member of the upbeat songs with morbid lyrics club, making it somewhat the pumped-up Kicks of its day. Oh, Darling makes good use of contrasting dynamics. It starts out really peaceful, but later on gets loud with shouted, strained vocals. I dig it quite a bit. Octopus's Garden is Ringo's one song. It's a very whimsical track, but I like it. It has a very innocent feel to it, and it's catchy. The chorus has a great sing-along quality, and I kind of feel like this would have been a good fit on Yellow Submarine. I Want You, She's So Heavy is groovy as hell. The opening riff makes you want to headbang, and it comes back later in the song. Overall, it has a very cool feeling to it, only aided by the sweet organ playing. At nearly 8 minutes, it's the longest song on the album, but it's worth it. Here Comes the Sun is another George song. As is the case with his other one, it's very peaceful. It's centered around his acoustic guitar playing and singing. While there are other instruments, they're not overbearing. Really pretty, I'll say. The rest of the album has a few short songs, less than 2 minutes. Paul was intending for them to flow into each other, sort of like a collage. Sun King is a very psychedelic song with its multi-layered vocal harmonies and reverb-heavy guitar playing. There are lyrics in Spanish, which is interesting, I suppose. Mean Mr. Mustard is a bit of a joke song. Whatever, I still think it's pretty catchy. The End is an absolute banger of a song. It's really upbeat and it reminds me of their early days. Not only is there a sweet guitar solo, but Ringo even gets to solo on drums, fitting to save his only ever drum solo for the final song on their final album. Except it isn't actually the final song, since there's a 23-second hidden track, Her Majesty. It's just Paul on acoustic guitar singing about how much he loves the Queen. Very British. So there you have it. My thoughts on what I feel are the standout tracks from every Beatles album. This is officially the longest I've spent on a single video, but honestly, I don't care. This was a super fun project to take on. My favorite album? I gotta say Revolver. It's the only record that I feel truly has no skips. The White Album is probably number 2. This was an interesting listening experience. Nearly 60 years of musical evolution has happened since the Beatles were a band, and despite that, the songs still sound great. The hooks are still catchy, and the vocal harmonies still bring a smile to my face. It was great to hear their progress as a band, from the simplistic love songs of Please Please Me to the colossal work of art that is the White Album. By the end of it, I feel like the aura surrounding the band was no more. For so long, the Beatles seemed almost like mythical figures to me. They were the 4 founding fathers of modern music. Listening to so much of their music, however, made that intimidation sort of die down. Of course, that didn't mean that I wasn't still in awe of the albums I was listening to. There's no real way to listen to Abbey Road and avoid thinking to yourself, holy cow, I'm listening to the one and only Abbey Road. All in all, it was an amazing experience to hear so many great songs that I hadn't before. To John, Paul, George, and Ringo, for all the great music, I want to say 2 words. Thank you. If you're still watching at this point, I want to say thank you so much for giving me your time. If you like what you saw, be sure to like and hit subscribe. I upload videos whenever I can, and I always have a ton of fun making them. I hope you have as much fun watching them. If you have an idea for a video you want me to do, just leave it down in the comments below. Who knows, maybe I'll get to it. I'm RobbieJ2734. I will see you when I see you next.